All right. So, good morning, everyone. This is our weekly hypnosis talks with me, Jasiah, and Pete. And we've decided today we want to just take this 20 minutes to talk about sort of the quote unquote history of hypnosis, but more so how, when you look into the cultures from around the world, around the times, working with the subconscious and listening in and relaxing and getting answers and so forth is something that has actually been around for a really long time. Probably since before recorded history, but absolutely since recorded history. So, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it's one where you see it so much more now, where people are like, "No, exciting!" Right? Um, they don't even always call it hypnosis. They call it, mind shifting, and they call it all these weird terms, right? Ultimately, it's the same thing, right? And it's something that throughout history, throughout cultures, has been the same thing, right? The way they induce trance and the expectations of the results and building up expectancy has always been there, you know, all the way back to, I say, Egyptian times, right? They um, did it more on a sound level, right? They used to have very specific rooms that would do very specific vibrations to bring your mind and body into a very specific state to make a change, right? Um, with Christians, right? It's very much where you would hear stories of Jesus, and everything he's doing is healing the mind and body, just maybe a little bit differently. If you think of like third world cultures, right? Or even not even third world, but like native cultures, right? Whether it's Native Americans or cultures in India or Africa or even Polynesia, right? They have their traditions. They just call it something different. You know, one of like that comes to my mind is in the Polynesian cultures is Ho'oponopono, right? Which by definition means to make right for you and me, but it's all about unconscious healing from going inwards to outwards, you know? And that amazes me because that has been around for centuries. But then you hear stuff from The Secret. It's the same thing, just called differently, you know? And so for us and what we do and how we see ourselves in the world, it's all about understanding the principles and the basics from way back then.
Yeah.
You know,
And I
it
want to just add, also like, of course, in the Chinese medicine and all of that, there's so much that has to do with thoughts and relaxing yourself, getting into, of course, all the systems that work in our bodies, but also just the paying attention and recognizing the energies, as well as in a lot of African cultures, the ones that I've been in, there are incredible rituals and just celebrations that happen that bring you into those states. And so it's this funny thing where we've come to this very kind of clinical way to sit down in a chair and, do this thing where some people are afraid it might unlock something they don't want to think about, or they enjoy it, but in a very clinical setting. But in all reality, throughout time that has been recorded, people have been getting into these states to heal, to listen, to connect, and so forth.
yeah, yeah. It's one where monks, right? They've been revered one of the most enlightened people in the world. They do self hypnosis on themselves to meet their higher power, right? Their source of energy, of love, of compassion, right? They put themselves into a trance state, and I love it because there's been so many I think they're fMRIs, where they do like the brain activity, where it shows that they're literally putting their brains in different states on different levels, right? Different speeds and everything. And then it was back, I think, in the early 1990s, they did studies with hypnosis participants where they hooked them up to the same machines and they saw the same exact change in the brain waves, right? Slowing them down, speeding them up, right? That they saw in monks, right? But they've learned that monks could control it just a lot better after 60 years of practice, right? But who can't do better after 60 years of practice? You know, they just have more control of it. But it shows to me that what monks do, they've been doing for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? And you're right. When we come over from, I say, the old traditional practices to what we do today, we become very clinical, right? We want to go, how did this happen? Why does this happen? What word did I say to make this happen, right? We go, how do I streamline this? How can I duplicate it so everyone can do it? You know, but that's where we fall into, I think, a big trap as far as the world and the communities we're in, because we're taking the individualness out of it. But it's the individualness that makes it work for us. You know, it's one where I think of like even my own clients, right? Yeah, there might be like steps to follow, but you have to individualize it to the person. So I look at it as people who are like me, who like, I really enjoy fishing, right? But I really don't like race cars, right? If I'm in a situation where I'm with a client who loves fishing and I talk about race cars, it's not going to have that same impact. They may conceptually go, oh, I get what he's saying, but it's not going to hit them at that deeper inner level, right? And so when we can take, really, when we think of all of those practices in monks and the Chinese cultures and, you know, all those, you know, I say traditional and long-standing practices where it's not just you have to go see someone. It's like a household practice. It's something you do in your house every day, right? It's part of your life. They make it very individualized for them. They don't worry about their neighbor or what's working for their neighbor. They don't worry about what's working for other people. They go, this is what's working for me to get the best results, you know? And we've tried to formalize a pattern around us to make it universal. But I think one of the greatest things I ever learned from Jerry Kine is that we're all snowflakes as far as we're all unique. You know, no two of us are the same. And if we treat everyone as if they're the same, we miss out on the beauty that is the snowflake.
Yeah, I love that. And I also feel like, you know, with that in mind, that, for the people who are listening, it's like you have a choice for how you want to get into that state. So if you do live, outside of a group culture that, has a real, manicured, you know, group experience of trance or music or dance or meditation, it's like there are other ways that you can get yourself into that space. So of course, like working with someone is a great thing if you're capable and able. And if you're not, or in the interim, in between, there are ways that you can also get yourself there, especially when you think about how many cultures around the world have various ways of getting to that state. And so I thought we could even talk a little bit about like what are some of the key elements that get you into that state, right?
Yeah. And to me, it really comes down to, I say, two basic things, right? One is you must feel safe. if you don't feel safe, it doesn't matter where you are, right? You could be in front of the world's most formidable expert. If you don't feel safe, you're gonna be on high alert, right? And that brings the other way. There's gotta be trust, right? There's gotta be trust that the person you're working with will not try and take advantage of you, or try and do harm, or try to manipulate you, or try to have you do something you don't want to do, right? If you don't feel safe and you don't trust, you will not let your mind go into the process, right? You will be on high alert going, nothing will bring me into this. Nothing will have me go, okay, I feel comfortable. You just won't go anywhere, right? And apart from that, like you said, there's music, there's walks, there's communities where everyone comes together and it's a collective, event. There's traditional as far as what we do, as far as hypnosis goes, where we induce trance, right? There's animals that can help. There, right? The how becomes more personal, right? Where if I was into dance and I could have someone go, we're going to dance to bring you into a feeling, and that feeling is going to be spread through your entire life, I'd be like, that's amazing, But if I hate dance, I'd be like, nope, not going to work for me. And it probably won't, just because it's not who I am, right? But it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It means it's just not right for me. And the right people that go, yeah, like that's what I need. And you look at the Native American cultures across the world, that's how they did it, right? Everyone would be around that campfire at night, and the guru, the town healer, right? That person who would induce trance would come out. He would do a dance. He would bring people along on that journey, and they would have an experience. I wish I could remember who it was. We're probably talking back in probably late 80s, early 90s. There was this news reporter who got sent out to Africa to look at one of the tribes there. And she was like, this is a bunch of bull crap. Like, you can't just be here and go in the trance, right? But when she was there, the elders of the tribe were like, just enjoy it. You don't have to, if you don't feel comfortable, don't participate. But if you enjoy it, watch what will happen. And she was like, okay. She said, I'll go in open-minded. And she left that interview at the end of that experience going, that was the most transformative moment of her life. She had visions like she's never had before. Now, she didn't speak the language. She had no idea what the guy was saying, but she followed along the experience, right? And ultimately had one of the best ones of her life. It's that powerful.
So there's a few things that I hear when you say that. One is about like feeling safe, trusting, being in an enjoyment state, which my understanding too is being in a place of like joy is one of the highest vibrations. And then there was one other thing. I didn't write it down, but those three things in themselves are like really important. If you're just, in your house, it's like, can you get to a place of feeling safe? If not fully, might you be able to in certain ways? By doing that, it might be by putting on some nice music. It might be moving your body around a bit. It might be sitting in place and just breathing, remembering a place of joy, and seeing if that remembering and that breathing can just like bring your body and everything into like a more relaxed state, right? And so also when you talk about like, this woman, for example, and when I think about experiences I've had and that I've seen, there's that element of letting the thinking mind go, which I think happens. You can see a lot. Like I saw when I was in Africa when they were having like their celebrations, you know, and I've seen it in a lot of places where it's like people are just in the present. It's like the awareness that they talk about in meditation. Just there's just that being, just the is, and just being that awareness, opposed to all that thinking mind, which seems to often make us not relaxed. The
Yeah.
thinking mind seems to be not relaxing overall. And when we are in a more relaxed state, it seems like we are open to listening, and also everything can just, you know, mellow your own self out, but also you might be able to hear yourself. And if the thinking mind isn't there to judge, like, you know, what's coming, then you might be able to kind of think, um, give yourself permission to hear what's coming, or nurture what's happening, or just sit in joy, and just in like non-judgment with what comes. So there's this sense of like the thinking mind going, you know, just taking a nap in the corner. And I feel like that's why, like, you know, someone who's experienced, especially in these cultures where, you know, there's someone who holds that place to come in and tell a story, all of a sudden your thinking mind is put to the side, because the listening part of yourself is taking the ride, listening to the story in a place of trust, being guided, maybe feeling comfortable, um, to listen to a story. And it changes the way that we are, right? There's that state change, which I think is what happens with the inductions in hypnosis, what happens in meditation, and then what of course happens in various like trance states. So it seems like one of the things for someone to think about who is, you know, wanting to do more of this work, again with a practitioner or with themselves, is getting to a state change, a change, right? A change in your state of being. Um, and generally the place that is going to get you to a relaxed place is finding a
Right.
way to feel safe, finding a way to like trust, maybe in a joyful moment, to breathe into it. Of course, there's many other ways, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, you're spot on, because I was when you were talking, I was talking to a reverend pretty recently, and I thought it was very fascinating because, you know, he was like, yeah, he called it the ego mind, right? He's like, when you go into a meditative state, it goes that ego mind is those thoughts. The ego mind is the one keeping you from really going, let me give myself to my higher power, right? To the opportunities, to the abilities of something different, right? It's our ego mind that says we are limited for who we are today, you
Mm.
know, and it's not our unconscious mind. It's not our higher power. It's our ego, right? And I thought that was very fascinating because he goes, when he started to learn to meditate, he had mind shatter like you wouldn't believe. He was like, he kind of joked about it because he was like, I thought I was going to be really easy, right? I was just going to sit down and close my eyes and I'd be there. And he goes, man, the thoughts, right? The limiting things of, oh man, like you're too fat and you're ugly and no one's going to want to listen to you and your sermons and you're no good and you shouldn't even be here. He goes, they all came flooding in. Yeah. And he was like, it scared me. But he realized that those were his ego thoughts, not his thoughts. And once he just accepted them, going, yes, ego, that is what you believe. Now let's hear from our higher power, right? To him, it's God. He went, let's hear what God has to say. And he goes, then all of a sudden, the little quiet whispers of like, no, no, you're going to do great. The quiet whispers of, no, no, you're going to be healthy, right? You are healthy. You're you're doing this and you're doing great and you have a loving family. He goes, they were like background noise. It wasn't loud, but he was able to tune into them. And it's not that the old thoughts went away. He said it took, weeks of every day, him taking just 10 minutes a day before they became so loud that the other ones disappeared. And I think for a lot of us, the first time we do this, especially when we're new, we get those other thoughts and we go, wow, like that's intense. Especially when we do it on our own. When we have a practitioner, a guide, it makes it a lot easier, right? But when we do it alone, those thoughts, they're going to be very adamant. They're going to be there, right? And it's our job to understand that that's not us. That's just our ego, right? And I love that because I'm like, that is very true, because it's not who we are. It's not who we become. It's not our limitations, right? It's just our ego speaking.
Well, and then with that too, the other side of that is that, if it's not your ego, then it's your awareness, right? Which some people feel is God, and some people, there's many ways, but there is the the other way of thinking about it, which is that it's your awareness, right? Which is different than your ego. And it's an incredible place to try to get to. Yeah. So, well, hopefully some people got some stuff out of that today, and there's always so much more to explore. And I feel like the point today that I just really want to get across is that hypnosis, for a lot of us in Western kind of society, know of it as in the office with these doctors in this kind of clinical way. And my suggestion is that this connection to the subconscious, and just connecting in with the awareness and all of that, is timeless and boundaryless. And there's so many ways to do it, actually. There are some kind of guiding principles, but depending on if you're around a fire with a whole bunch of people who've been doing it for generations, or by yourself in a room, there are still ways to get to a place that you can just let the ego go. You can let anxiety go. There's breathing, there's techniques like within your biology that will help you. And that there's techniques within mental thinking practices, breathing, move. There's so many ways. And so that's the point I wanted to get across about that today. What about you, Pete, to end it off?
Yeah, to me, it's one where we think it's scary, but it's one of the oldest, most natural ways to heal.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think for us as people, we have to get beyond the words and get into the emotional side of it. And that's what makes the difference, right? I don't care if people call it guided meditation, they call it hypnosis, they call it brain shifting, right? It's finding some place and someone you feel comfortable with and trust. That's what's going to make the difference, despite whatever it's called. And you'll get those feelings when you see someone, when you meet someone, that gut instinct, and listen to that over everything else.
Yeah, right on. I love that. All right. Well, thank you everyone who listened today. Thank you, Pete. And until next week. Oh, we have a comment. Oh, hooray. Sharon says she so agrees. I don't know at what point that she agreed, but thank you, Sharon, for participating. And all right, until next week, everyone. Thank you so very much. Bye.
Right?